What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about our favorite hobby, video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 53. So just past the 1 year mark for the podcast, which is really exciting. And on to the next one, year 2, I guess it is. So hope you're all doing well out there. Hope you guys had an awesome Valentine's Day. That was just this past week. If you even celebrate that, whether it be with a significant other, friends, family, Singles Awareness Day, whatever you want to call it. Hope you guys had some good times. Maybe went out to a nice dinner or just cooked dinner at home, shared a nice beverage, had a good time. Just enjoyed it. Whatever it means to you. Hopefully, you had a good time. Myself, it was just me and the fam. Of course, had to get the wife some flowers, and it was. I got to be honest, it was quite adorable because I made my son give them to her, and it was a very heartfelt moment. Got to teach them young, how to treat a lady. So that was nice, and then we just chill at home, and it's kind of funny. We've been doing this thing where we turn on like a Harry Potter movie. I'm in like full Harry Potter mode right now, and we'll get to Hogwarts Legacy a little bit later in the show. But we've kind of been just turning them on in the background, like during dinner and stuff like that. And I can't remember watching some of these movies over the years because it's been so long, and I've never read the books. And they're awesome. I'm really enjoying it just because I'm a total like in the mindset of Harry Potter right now. So that's been fun as well. Also, I have to admit, last week I wrongly picked the Super Bowl winner. I did pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, but they did not. It was Kansas City again. So, there's that. And I don't know, what did you guys think about the halftime performance? At least here in the States, I'm pretty sure you watched it. And I have to say, I thought it was quite boring. I'm not even a big Rihanna fan. I don't really care for much of her songs, but even though you may not like the artist, sometimes they're like great performers. Like I personally think like Justin Timberlake is a fantastic performer. I could give two shits about his music, but he knows how to put on a show. But Rihanna is just like, I don't even know what I was watching here, to be quite honest. Apparently she was pregnant during that, so I guess it makes sense that she's not going to do anything super crazy, but that is what it is. Also, I've got to say this right at the top. There's a new show that just came out on Netflix. You guys know I'm into golf. I'm a big golf guy, and it's this new docu-series that came out called Full Swing on Netflix. And it's done by the creators who did that F1 show, like the Formula One docu-series, and it's great. Like I've actually watched the first 2 seasons of the Formula One. My wife and I started that, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe. And I don't care about Formula One at all. Like I'm not into racing, but this show is so good. The way it shows like behind the scenes, the way it portrays some of the drivers and just what goes into Formula One, I found quite fascinating. And it was very well shot, very well put together. And it's the same guys who were doing this for the PGA Tour, where they followed last year a handful of the top PGA Tour players like Rory McIlroy, Scotty Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, Justin Thomas, etc. And you get to see each episode kind of a little look into it, and it's great. So 2 episodes in, I highly recommend it. Even if you're not into golf, I think it'd be a cool watch just to kind of get an insight into the sport. So it's great, and it's something I've been waiting for a long time. So I'm super stoked about that. Something to watch. And of course, I'm recording this on a Friday evening. So, and actually a little bit earlier, not Friday evening, Friday afternoon, excuse me. Got sunlight, a little bit more energy than I normally do. So I'm feeling pretty good. And I'm excited about this week's episode of The Last of Us. So we'll talk about that in the next episode of the show, because we covered last week 2 episodes since they did the last episode on Friday a week ago. But all that. So again, welcome to the show. This is a video games podcast. We will get to the video games here in a moment. But for those of you who are new to the show, and I know that you're out there, remember the best way you can support the show is leave us kind reviews. Just any reviews on the podcast platforms would be great. Helps us get into the algorithms. You can also find us on all the social medias. Video versions go up on YouTube and Rumble. You can find it like the Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Gamecite Podcast. And over on Locals, you can join the community over there for free and get access to the audio version of the podcast 2 days early. Goes up every Saturday. Otherwise, you can catch new episodes of the show each and every week, Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, you'll notice today, since we are recording a little bit earlier, I'm drinking a Red Bull. I told you I don't always drink alcoholic beverages on the show. Sometimes we bust out a Red Bull, and let me tell you, this is fantastic. I just have to say. So I think we got an exciting episode this week. Let me scroll to my notes here, because we've had some interesting bits come out. I don't think it was a super heavy news week, and I still got one episode where I really want to dive into PlayStation and talk about their future in a future episode. But there was something big that came out of the Activision deal that I want to dive into this week. Of course, I feel like we can talk about this all the time, but it's in regards to Game Pass, and I think it's pretty important. So there was some news regarding how Game Pass is cannibalizing sales that came out, and I want to dive into that. So we'll be diving into that topic. A couple other smaller news items I do want to touch on. There's this rumor going around about PlayStation headphones, like earbuds. So we'll touch on that. Also, Horizon Forbidden West is coming to PS Plus Extra this month, which is pretty crazy. I want to touch on that. And there's a Tetris movie coming out, which, spoiler alert, I think looks pretty good. So we'll dive into that. But before we get into that, of course, we've got to talk about the games that we are playing. Of course, I want to hear from you. Let me know what games you're playing. Right into the show. Let us know. For me, as I mentioned last week, we finally finished Death Stranding. Now I've moved on to Hogwarts Legacy. And I haven't had a ton of time to play. So I've probably only played the game roughly 7 hours. And quite frankly, in kind of small spurts. But I think I'm roughly about 7 hours in the game. The game clock rounds to the hour, so it's not like entirely accurate and super helpful. But that said, I have to say, this game's pretty awesome. I'm really, really digging it. And again, this is coming from someone I'm not a big Harry Potter fan. I never was a big Harry Potter fan during the movies. I've never read the books, though I have to say this game is making me a Harry Potter fan in just wanting to get into this world a little bit more. And it's kind of making me almost want to read the books, which is kind of weird. Never thought I'd say that. I think one of the things that stands out to me the most about this game is its attention to detail. It's incredible. You can tell that there's so much love and care that's gone into this game just by walking around Hogwarts Castle. I mean, there's so many little things in every nook and cranny, and it seems, at least from what I've seen of the movies, pretty spot on in terms of the layout, various places, and there's obviously some Easter eggs in there for fans, and it's pretty damn incredible. I have to say, I find it absolutely fun. Like, it's so fun to just run around the castle and explore. The other thing is this game is definitely a checkbox game. You got percentages in terms of collectibles and exploration and different challenges, and I like that style of game. That appeals to my OCD to a certain degree, and I'm really enjoying it. So there's different collectibles to find in Hogwarts Castle. There's different challenges to do, and so it's just really fun, just kind of wandering around, finding collectibles. And I haven't done too much of outside of Hogwarts, but I know once I get there, it'll be fun doing some of the combat challenges and all that stuff. So it's I think it's great so far. One of the things I want to touch on regarding this game, because I've seen a little bit of different takes on it, is the combat. And if you watch the combat, like if you watch a stream, watch the gameplay, it doesn't really look that exciting. Looks kind of repetitive, looks generic almost, because you're just shooting spells and maybe you do a different spell or something like that. And when you're actually doing it, though, I find it much more engaging. And it's pretty fun once you finally start getting some different spells and learning how to do different combos, because that's how you do the most damage in this game. And so I've got a couple different spells that I've learned right now and gotten into some dicey combat situations where I've almost died a couple of times, just because you have to time your blocks. Um, Similar to like Spider-Man or Batman Arkham games, you kind of get this little like sixth sense to where you know you're going to be attacked, so you can time your blocks that way. And then so if you do that, it lets you counter and get some good damage in. But then you can also use various spells and can combine various spells with your basic attack spell to kind of do some heavy damage, and just kind of put up some nice combos. So that's actually been pretty fun. I think it's a nice mix of kind of stacking your attacks, but then timing your blocks and just trying to get those combos. I think it's pretty cool. So, all in all, I have to say I'm really enjoying this game. Its structure is very, very much your basic kind of open world RPG style of game. Um, so it doesn't really bring anything new to the table there, but I think that's totally okay. I wouldn't expect it to. I think what's great about this game is the fact that it's this magical world of Harry Potter. So I'm excited to jump back into it, continue more, and all. Like I said, I think it's awesome so far. I've very much enjoyed my time. Now I have jumped into another game on my PlayStation Vita, which actually I have right here, and I've got my little um, grip for it just because it makes it easier with the dual sticks. But I've been playing Habroxia 2, which is from Lily Mo Games. That's Colin Moriarty's. If you listen to Sacred Symbols, his studio that he co-owns, and I think it's their latest game. And I picked it up. I picked this game up. I think it was on sale over the holidays. I mentioned it in one of the earlier episodes of the show. And I know I got the PS4 and PS5 version, but I didn't realize I had access to the Vita version. And I was kind of just messing around on my Vita, and I saw that I could download it, and I was like, oh great, like I'll just play it here. That's perfect. So I jumped into that over the last couple of days, just like in bed. And Habroxia 2 is basically an arcade style, like twin stick shooter almost, because you use the right stick directionally to shoot your spaceship, and then you can kind of move up and down, left and right as you kind of auto scroll go through these different levels. And it's great. It's kind of difficult at first, once you kind of get your bearings, kind of understand the level where the enemies are, kind of expect them. Um, but it's fun and it's satisfying to get to the challenges. So you go through the level, then you get to the boss. Sometimes there's a secret pathway to get to like a secondary boss. There's some collectibles to find, and it's great. It's really cool so far. Kind of a great game just to kind of jump in, play a level or two, and kind of jump back out. I know it's not terribly long. I think you can beat the game within a couple hours. I don't know if it's a game I'll try to get the platinum for. I think it's pretty difficult if I remember. But I'm certainly gonna play through it. I'm enjoying my time with it, and I would definitely recommend it if you love those kind of old school arcade style of games, especially because you can play it on the Vita. Like that's awesome. Like the Vita is such an underrated machine, and I really wish I would have played it more back in its heyday. But I still got it. Still got a few games I could jump into. So good times there. The other thing I want to say too is I just got notification that my PSVR 2 is on its way because it's coming from PlayStation Direct. So I know PSVR 2 comes out, I think, on the 22nd, and I'm supposed to get it on the 22nd delivered. So this upcoming Wednesday. And I'm stoked, super stoked on that. So I'll share it here on the next episode of the show. And I'll probably have dived into a game or two on it. Horizon Call of the Mountain has been getting some pretty good reviews. I haven't looked too much into it, but I've seen a lot of eights, nines, tens across the board. So that's really encouraging that it's a good VR game. I still think I'm going to pick up. Let me look it up here. PSVR 2 launch games. There's another game I wanted to pick up that I thought looked pretty cool and I think would be really fun to jump into. What was it called? Let's see if I can find it. If it's here. Nope, that's not the right one. Here we go. Every game announced for PSVR 2. I definitely want to get Moss Book 1 and 2. I know those games are very good. But there's another one. There's this kayaking game where you're like literally in a kayak and you do like the thing. That might actually kind of be a neat game to play, but that's not something I'm going to pick up. Firewall Ultra, I do want to get, but I don't think that's a launch game. Is it Firewall? No, it's not Firewall. I'm sorry. Crossfire, Sierra Squad. That's the game I really, really want to play, but that's not a light. Here it is, The Light Brigade. That's a launch day game. And this is a roguelike that's like a shooter. So I don't know. You get magical powers, but it's also a shooter with different guns, roguelike. It seems like a game where you can kind of hop in, play a round or two in the VR, and then hop out, which I think is perfect for VR. I don't think I can do long sessions of VR. So I think that's the other game I'm going to get. So I will, once I dive into that, I'll report on. But I'm excited, man. The headset and everything looks super nice. A lot of people are saying it's very high quality. So I am stoked. That's coming in really just a mere number of days. And I can't wait, man. I cannot wait. Okay. So let's jump into some of that news. Starting with those PlayStation earbuds. So Sony is reportedly working on some PlayStation wireless earbuds. And according to Insider Gaming, their sources have revealed that Sony is developing wireless earbuds and a new wireless headset for the PS5, and both are scheduled to release toward the end of fiscal year 2023, which is, I think it's April 2023 through that'd be March 2024. So pretty exciting stuff, I have to say. So let's read a little bit of this article over at Insider Getting from Tom Henderson, who's pretty reliable. He says, quote, the earbuds, named Project Nomad, will have an approximate battery life around 5 hours, which is almost identical to Apple's AirPods, but slightly less than Sony's WF-1000XM3's 6-hour battery life. Of course, just like almost all wireless earbuds on the market, the Nomad will come with a charging case that can be charged via USB-C to the PlayStation 5. In addition, the same connection method will be used for the wireless earbud updates on the PS5. As well as the earbuds, sources have also said that the company is developing a new wireless headset for the PlayStation 5 named Voyager, and is also aiming to be released at a similar time to Nomad. It's understood that the Voyager headset has similar functionality to the InZone H7 headset, but its price point is yet to be determined. Although not confirmed by sources, what makes both these products' release dates particularly interesting is their proposed release date. Last year, Insider Gaming exclusively reported that Sony is developing a new PlayStation 5 with a detachable disc drive, which is expected to hit shelves in September of 2023. If both scheduled release dates are met, it could suggest that Sony is planning a serious relaunch of sorts for the console. End quote. And that's pretty exciting. I think this is really, really interesting. Interesting stuff here, because not only would this, I think, be the first time we get like gaming specific earbuds, but also we're going to get a new revamped headset. And then, of course, it was reported last year, but a new discless PS5 with a detachable disc drive. Like, so basically a new model of the PlayStation 5, I think is really, really interesting. I would definitely be interested in some earbuds that work specifically for the PlayStation 5. Obviously, I have AirPod Pros. I use these for work. I use them to listen to podcasts, stuff like that. These are great, but I don't think there's an easy way to have these work with your PlayStation console. So to have something that would be dedicated for that, I think would be really nice. You know, over the ears, I get, noise cancellation. Uh, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I like earbuds. They're just more comfortable, and so I would like that. I would really like that. And I also think this makes sense because you think about with the PSVR 2, having earbuds you could just pop in and then put on the headset without having to put on the headset and then put on headphones, like over the ear headphones, I think makes a lot of sense. And for them to get into this using what they already kind of do in the Sony space, to me, it just makes sense. Now, the question is the price. Now, we know the current headset price for the 3D Pulse headset is $99. And so, what could earbuds cost? I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe 150, so like 149.99 might be a solid price point. Um, and then that other headset, I don't know how much the InZone H7 headset is. Let's look that up. The InZone is such a terrible name. I think these are actually pretty expensive. Yeah, $200. So I could see it probably being $200 for that if it's a higher end one, or hitting that 99 to $150 price point as well. Well, we shall see, but it's pretty exciting, and it's kind of cool that one of the things that Sony's been doing with this generation of PlayStation consoles has really been getting into the accessory space. I mean, you got the detachable faceplates. They've been um, doing a lot of the color controllers, though I think they can do better. The Pulse headset. We've got the DualSense Edge, which I still want to pick up. They've got the whole InZone line, which again, terrible name. And then, potentially this with the VR2. It's a lot. They're doing a lot of things to really support this kind of ecosystem within PlayStation. So I'm all for it. Again, I'm a big PlayStation fan. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. So I'm for it. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it right away, but yeah, let's check it out and see if it's any good. Oh man, that is so good. I love that. I love that taste of Red Bull. Oh, so good. Okay, let's move on to this next one. And that is that Horizon Forbidden West is coming to the PS Plus Extra tier. And I thought this was really interesting. And maybe I'm reading into it too much. But as they do every month, about the middle of every month, they update the new games that are coming to the PS Plus Extra and the PS Plus Premium services. And so Horizon Forbidden West is kind of the big title coming to PS Plus Extra in February, including others like Outriders, which is pretty exciting, The Quarry, Tekken 7, Borderlands 3, Scarlet Nexus, etc. But the biggest out of this bunch is definitely Horizon Forbidden West. And I found this interesting because the game's only been out for about a year now. It came out February of last year. And I'm curious because normally you wouldn't want to put these games on the subscription service unless you felt like you've extracted the maximum value from retail sales. So does this mean that they feel like they've extracted the maximum value from this game before putting on the service? I don't know. And does this also mean we can expect to see, first party titles come to the service within a year of its release? That time will tell, I guess, as we continue down. But I think that's really interesting. Now, I was trying to find sales figures on Horizon Forbidden West. I couldn't find anything concrete. I don't think Sony's kind of been um, upfront about that, like they have with God of War Ragnarok. So, just speculation, but from what I've seen, it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 million copies of this game. I do know that it was bundled with a bunch of PS5s, and I know it was kind of tops of the sales charts kind of throughout the year. So I have to imagine it did fairly decent, and so anywhere between 5 to 10 million, I think, kind of makes sense. But again, I have to imagine it might be under what they were looking for this game, because Sony hasn't come out with like hard numbers. And usually, when its game does well, Sony's going to come out and say, "Hey, look at me." And they didn't really do that with this game. Now, we all know that one of the biggest problems with this game is its timing. Like the first game, unfortunately, Horizon Zero Dawn, the first one, came out like 3 days before Zelda Breath of the Wild. And Breath of the Wild stole all the air, stole all the spotlight. No matter how good Horizon was, it was Breath of the Wild. I mean, we all know that game. And then this time, it comes out right before Elden Ring. And we all know Elden Ring took the world by storm. And so, yet again, this game had its spotlight kind of taken away from it just because of the timing. And have to imagine maybe that's affected some of the sales of the game. We shall see, but I just find it very curious. I didn't expect this game to be coming to the service so soon. Now I know there's other ones like Returnal and I think Ratchet and Clank are on the service and stuff like that. So maybe it's just kind of part of how they would view the life cycle of a game, going from retail sales, a la carte sales, to then the subscription service, and then eventually PC. So maybe that's kind of the cycle that all these games are going to go through. One of the things I was kind of thinking about, though, is that maybe they just want to get it into people's hands in anticipation of the upcoming DLC, the Burning Shores DLC, which comes out in April. So maybe they want to, those that are subscribed to the service, maybe didn't buy the game, give them a chance to play it in hopes that maybe they'll purchase the DLC and it'll kind of spike DLC sales that way. I don't know. Just some speculation there, but I found that really, really interesting. And so if you're a PS Plus Extra subscriber, you can, and have not played Horizon Forbidden West, by all means, go download that game. That game is phenomenal. It's definitely, I would say, one of the best games I played last year. I think it's very high quality. The story is incredible, and it's really, really fun. I mean, just to take down those dinosaur robots is an absolute blast. So pretty interesting stuff. And I guess my question, as I mentioned earlier, is this going to be a pattern for other first party titles? Like for example, will we see God of War Ragnarok come to PS Plus Extra in November 2023? Who knows? So the last little news story I wanted to touch on is this Tetris movie. So a trailer dropped, I want to say it was yesterday from the time of the recording, for this Tetris movie that's upcoming. And the premise of this story is basically the story of acquiring the intellectual property rights to Tetris the game from Russia. Because I think it was originally created in Russia, but I think the Russian government owns a lot of the intellectual property rights. And so it's this dude who says, understands how incredible this game is, and is goes to Russia to work with the creator and to basically smuggle the game out or try to get the IP rights for this game so it can be released with the Game Boy. And it's awesome because there's a scene in the trailer where the main character is in I think it's Nintendo's R&D lab, and they show him the first prototype of the Game Boy, and it's this is the Game Boy, and he's like, you got to put Tetris on this. And I don't know. At first I thought it was a stupid, when I heard the Tetris movie, I was like, oh my god. I kept thinking of that Adam Sandler movie, Pixel, I think is what it's called, with Pac-Man, and that was god awful. But I watched the trailer for this and I'm like, this actually looks pretty dope. I love this. And obviously it's probably maybe exaggerated a little bit. It's Hollywoodized in terms of what the real story was, but it is based on the true, on true events. And it's, albeit not exactly, but it's kind of, historical about one of the most iconic, greatest games ever made. I mean, in a lot of ways, it is the perfect video game. And so I'm excited. I kind of want to watch this. Now, it comes on Apple Plus on March 31st. So in 6 weeks. But I think it looks really cool. So go check out the trailer for Tetris, the movie, and let me know what you think about it, because I'm all for this. And I think right now Xbox is doing a 3-month trial or something for Apple Plus. So fits in right in that window. I think I'm going to check it out and watch it. And I will report out when I do, for sure. That's good. So now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode regarding Game Pass. Again. So, in the ongoing tribulation of the Activision deal, it's come out in a new report from the UK's Competition and Markets Authority, which is the CMA, that Microsoft has admitted that software added to Game Pass has its sales figures significantly impacted as a result. And this was reported on by multiple outlets. I'm going to read it from, ironically, Push Square, one of my favorite sites. Shocker, I know. But let's read a little bit of the article, some of the report, and we'll go from there. So it states, Xbox's popular Game Pass subscription is tanking the sales of games that join the service. Included in a new report from the UK's Competition Markets Authority, Microsoft has admitted that software added to Game Pass has its actual sales figures significantly impacted as a result. Quote, Microsoft also submitted that its internal analysis shows a redacted percent decline in base game sales 12 months following their addition to Game Pass. The report states, so for a year following a game's launch on Game Pass, it sees a dip in sales on Xbox platforms. This is the opposite of remarks Phil Spencer made about the perceived effects of Game Pass on the market. The executive said putting a game on Game Pass was, quote, leading to more sales of the game, end quote. But now a platform holder is saying otherwise. Interestingly, Activision shows concerns about the subject as well. In the same report, Microsoft says the publisher isn't comfortable with including its games on subscription services, as doing so might, quote, severely cannibalize B2P, buy to play, sales, particularly in the case of new releases, end quote. Sony has been more cautious about putting large-scale games on the revamped PS Plus day one, especially when it comes to its own first-party titles. The company is sticking to a more traditional premium release method. It's been working out well with record-breaking sales for games like God of War Ragnarok and others. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan has made his thoughts on the matter pretty clear in the past, and with this revelation from Microsoft, it seems he may have been right. God, I can't read. End quote. So that's the article. There is an update to this article that I will touch on, where Xbox sent out a press release in response to this. And they say, quote, Xbox Game Pass offers games and game creators more choice and opportunity in how they discover, experience, and deliver games. For gamers, that means providing another option for them to discover and play with friends at a great value. For developers, that means creating another option for how they monetize their games. We're focused on helping game creators of all sizes maximize the total financial value they receive through Game Pass. Each game is unique, so we work closely with creators to build a custom program to reflect what they need and ensure that they are compensated financially for their participation in the service and allow room for creativity and innovation. As a result, the number of developers interested in where Game Pass continues to grow. Corporate lingo translation, yes, it's affecting game sales. So I think this is really, really interesting because I think this is the first time that Microsoft has admitted that yeah, this is hurting games sales on our platform. And in a lot of ways, I feel like this is pretty obvious because, I mean, if a game is on Game Pass, you have an Xbox, you're subscribed to the service, why would you buy it? You could play it for the service you've already played. I mean, now there are instances, sure, and exceptions to the rule, yes, to where that, yeah, maybe you're playing a game and it's leaving the service, so you buy it. And I think Microsoft offers a discount for that. Great. And certainly people do that, and that's a real thing for sure. But that doesn't dissuade the fact that the majority aren't buying the games, and it does impact the sales, as admitted here. And that redacted number, who knows what that percentage is, but that is an important point to make. I feel like this is also, obvious, but I also feel like I feel a little vindication with this news, because this is something I've been talking about and touched on multiple times on the show as it relates to Game Pass. And one of the things I've been talking about is that I feel like Game Pass has been transforming the way we think about game prices. It's bringing them down. One of the things people love about Game Pass is the value, right? It's affordable. You pay $10, $15 a month, you get access to the library of games, and on a per game basis, you cannot beat that value. So it subconsciously, it brings the value of the game price down and changes how people buy games. I mean, how many times have we seen people online talk about, whatever X new game is coming out? They're like, oh, is it on Game Pass? Oh, it's not? Okay, well then I'll wait for Game Pass. Or on the flip side of that, and in a more positive light, we see people who have tried out Xbox games who say, I probably never would have touched this if it wasn't for Game Pass. And that's a good thing, right? I do understand the value of that, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's bringing the prices of video games down. And that's contradictory to where prices to make games are going. We all know that making games is super expensive. It's ever increasing. It's taking longer to make these games. And that's a problem. And so we all know that Xbox doesn't care about game sales because they never report on it. I mean, that's not what they're focused on, right? They're focused on Game Pass. They're focused on building the subscription service. And so with this news, though, it's kind of interesting because that may change. I don't know, but it's very, very interesting. But I don't think we can get away from the fact that this is hard to overlook. And in a time where costs to make games are going up, we're seeing a lot of people say, I don't want to pay that price, and they want them cheaper. So it's an interesting time when we talk about the economics, and Game Pass is a huge disruptor within the industry. Now, one of the things that I think is important to think about is we all know that Xbox Game Pass is heavily subsidized by microtransactions and other revenue areas of Xbox and Microsoft. It's backed by the deep pockets of Microsoft. That's why they say, in the past they've said it's sustainable, right? So all that aside, we know it's subsidized, right? And even though I think it was recently reported that Game Pass revenue, so gross revenue, not net revenue, was like $2.9 billion or something like that, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But that doesn't tell us what the cost was and how much money they're actually making, taking home in profit. And we all know that the deep pockets of Microsoft is what one of the things that allows this to continue, not only at the price point, but to give the value that it does, and to push all the prices down. And to what I think their ultimate plan is to push their competition out of the market by undercutting game prices, and eventually have some sort of, not entirely, but a monopolization on game distribution and game services. Sorry, my nose is a little plugged up. You can probably tell. So if we subsidization aside, if we take Game Pass as the model and we say, okay, if you just have this pool of subscription money from all your subscribers, how does it work? Because I can't figure this out in my mind, how you make money off this subscription service. So again, keeping aside the subsidizations, you have this limited pool of money from your subscriptions, and with that pool of money, that has to go to your first party studios. It has to go to your second party studios and games and any other third party games that you want to bring to the platform from this one pool of subscription money. Now, again, I know you have the subsidizations with microtransactions, store, ticks off your storefront, yada, yada, yada. But if we're trying to look at the model in and of itself in isolation, that pool of money, I don't think there's enough money to go around. I just don't see it. I don't think the math adds up. And at some point, you're basically giving away games for free, especially your first party games. I mean, think about when games like Redfall, Starfield start hitting the service. Yes, they'll sell those games. Maybe they'll sell some copies of that game. But you're basically putting in your service, you're giving it away for free, right? For the low price of your subscription entry point. And that's very different than how PlayStation and Nintendo do it. And I just don't know how you intend to make money off of that in the long run. Because like, for example, look at PlayStation with God of War Ragnarok, right? Since we were just kind of talking about that earlier. God of War Ragnarok, they recently said they announced that game sold, I think it was 11 million copies in like the first 3 months. And let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say that is, on average $60 a pop for the game. You do that math, that's about $660 million in revenue for the one game. And that's one game, which is about a little less than a quarter from that latest revenue report of like 2.99 billion for Game Pass, but that's one game. We know Game Pass has, I think it's close to 400 games right now. So PlayStation from this one game is making that amount of money. But then they have all these other games they come out. And so the thing is each game provides a revenue stream in and of itself. It's not, they're not taking from the one pool, they're individualized. It's kind of funny because this almost reminds, like, this comparison almost reminds me of like communism, in the sense like communism is right, like for the people, right? Everyone's all the same, and it's all this unity. Whereas, like capitalism is all about the individual and what you can do and what you can contribute and profit of within society. And so it's almost like the collective versus the individual. Now, I'm not saying Game Pass is communism. Don't get me wrong. It's not. But that's kind of what it reminds me of when it comes to collectivism versus individualism, because Game Pass is collectivism, right? You have this pool of subscription money, whereas, PlayStation, Nintendo are selling each of their games individually on an individual basis, and they have each are generating their own set of revenue. And then, as time goes on, so you collect money from each of those games, and then, we all know kind of this life cycle now that PlayStation is setting up to where, okay, now we can put on the subscription service. Maybe we'll boost some subscribers that way. Eventually we can put it on PC, sell the game that way, and just kind of slowly extract value at different stages from one product. And they can do that with all of their products, which is vastly different than what Xbox is doing. And without the deep pockets of Microsoft, again, that subsidization from other parts, I don't know how this service works out. Because again, if you have that finite pool of money that's got to be spread across all your services without the deep pockets and a subsidization, I don't know how it works. And maybe that's the point, right? Maybe the entire point is to subsidize it. But I don't think other companies like PlayStation, Nintendo can do that, nor can they afford to do that. And that's a problem. I don't want to live in a world where we don't have, like, I'm not, and again, I'm not saying Nintendo or PlayStation is going to go out of business, but I don't want to live in a world where we don't have the vibrant PlayStation or the vibrant Nintendo, because they bring a lot of value and they bring a lot of new ideas and different games to the table. Now, I will say this. I do understand that Game Pass is consumer friendly. I get that, even though I despise that term, because usually in the context that it's used, it means people just want free shit. But I do understand the value of Game Pass. I mean, there's no denying that Game Pass is a remarkable deal. I mean, there's so many games on there. If you've never played Xbox and you jump into the Xbox ecosystem, hop onto Game Pass, never played any of these games, I mean, boy, do you have a lot of great titles to go through, especially from the 360 era, a few from the Xbox One, and maybe even a few, some of the Bethesda games. I mean, you have a lot of great games you can kind of sink your teeth into for next to nothing. So I understand the value there, and I understand that everyone wants a good deal. But I also think we have to be realistic about the economics of the industry and how changing it to this subsidization model with subscription services, I don't think is going to benefit anybody but Xbox. And that's not what we want. I don't think that's the competitive industry we're really looking for when it comes to that, because that's bringing game prices down with the cost of games going up, and not everyone can fit in that pie. And it's kind of similar. The way I view what Xbox is trying to do with Game Pass is similar to what Amazon did to like mom and pop stores, to where Amazon comes in and offers a similar product at a much lower price that the mom and pop stores cannot afford to sell their products off. And to consumers, I mean, you can get the same product for much cheaper through Amazon, because Amazon can afford to sell it at a loss, to put the other places out of business, and therefore be the one left standing to say, Well, now you have to come to Amazon to get it, and then they can raise the prices from there, and then it's a win-win from them. I That's what I feel like Microsoft is doing with Game Pass in the industry, and that's not what I want. Even though a lot of us love Amazon, you can find a great deal on Amazon, but to understate the disruption that Amazon has had on small businesses and to some of the industries, I think is something we shouldn't avoid. And that is something that I don't want to see happen to gaming, to this industry. And I I don't know, I just think it's something important to take a look at and kind of think about when we talk about the economics of the video game industry. Now, one of the big arguments I've seen regarding this is that, folks get to try a bunch of games out. Sometimes they go out and buy them, and the devs get a nice payday. So it's kind of a win-win for everyone. And I think I think there are some situations where yes, that's absolutely true. And actually, there's one dev who I saw tweeted this out. Let me pull it up here. So I got to go to my Twitter. I'm not prepared for this, of course. Here it is. So he's one of the devs over at No More Robots Studios. I think they made games like Descenders and stuff like that. But he says this: every time Game Pass is in the news, my Descenders search fills with mentions as people on both sides try to explain why Descenders is proof of their claim about Game Pass. And every single time, oh boy, do I learn that gamers do not understand how video games work at all. All I can say is we're aiming to get every single title that we publish from now on onto Game Pass. In doing so, we'll secure success for each title and will relieve immense pressure for the devs. But please, gamers, continue to explain why it's bad for us. And the replies to that are kind of mixed. You see some people say, "Hey, I loved your game. I tried it on Game Pass. You guys are great." A lot of people that agree with it, but on the other end, a lot of people are saying like your games are shit, and of course you want to rely on the Game Pass money. And while I haven't played any of the studio's games, I have to I kind of have to admit that, like, yeah, you're a smaller indie studio. So, yeah, of course you want that Game Pass money. Who doesn't, right? It's guaranteed income. Of course people want the money. And if you're getting, so if you have a smaller budget title and you're an indie studio and you get your game on Game Pass, I mean, you can walk away with a fat payday. Not only do you cover the cost of your game, you probably get some revenue. And then you get your game launched onto a very curated service with a lot of subscribers to where you're getting a lot of faces on your game, and it can be very good in that regard for sure. But does that work for every developer? I don't know. I feel like if it did, we'd hear more about it. And how does this work for AAA devs? If you have a bigger budget game, let's say $150 million for a AAA game, I doubt that you're getting $150 million to put your game on Game Pass. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, we don't know these numbers, but I think that's something to consider for sure when we talk about, oh, it's being so good for the devs. So, I mean, maybe it works for some of these smaller devs, and I think that's great. I like the idea of getting guaranteed money. You don't have to worry about sales and all that stuff, nor how many copies that you'd sell. But again, I don't know how this works for bigger budget AAA games. I mean, there's that game, what is it? Wo Long Fallen Dynasty, I think that game that's coming out. That's a day one title on Game Pass. I'm curious how much money did Xbox pay to have that come to Game Pass day one? I would love to know that number because that would give us some context into how much they're paying for these games. Now, that game is also going to be sold on PlayStation, PC, etc. But I can't imagine that the money they're taking from Game Pass is covering all the costs for their game. It just seems like I don't know, it seems like a lot of money, but maybe it is. I don't know. But that's a lot of money for Xbox to be paying, especially if you talk about that limited pool of money again. And so there's that. But then at the end of it, what about all the devs that don't make it to Game Pass? What about them? So what about all those other devs that don't make it to Game Pass? Because here's the thing. On the Xbox platform, if you're not on Game Pass, bro, unless you're a very exceptional game like an Elden Ring, maybe a Dead Space remake, very big. Dude, you're not selling jack squat on that platform. I hate to say that, but it's true. I mean, even on the PlayStation storefront, and these storefront, there's so many games that come out. It's so hard to get the light. And with Xbox in particular, anytime anyone talks about Xbox, what do they say? Game Pass. What is it always about? Game Pass. Every single time. Every time. There's nothing else that anyone talks about. And so if you're not on that service, good luck selling your game. Good luck. So what about all those other devs that don't get on the service? What happens when you don't get on the service? Good luck, you know? Is that what we want? Is that the system that we want? To where if you're not on this fancy, high curated service, you're kind of screwed on that platform? Maybe this is an indicator of why a lot of devs have focused their efforts on PlayStation and Nintendo. Maybe. I just speculation here. But take Square Enix, for example. We know a lot of Square Enix games aren't coming to Xbox. Is it quite possible that maybe they see the writing on the wall and that, well, games don't really sell on Xbox, so why would we make an effort over there when we know we could put it on this platform and get sales? Or platforms, I should say. Just some food for thought. I mean, heck, look, in that document, in the same document where Microsoft admits about Game Pass, Activision Blizzard admits that they also worry about putting their AAA games on the service because it will cannibalize sales. Again, maybe it works for smaller indie titles, and I think that's great. I like the idea of them not having to worry about sales. They get access to a big audience. That's a win situation, but that doesn't work for everybody. And if the likes of Activision are concerned about it, and PlayStation, and heck, even Nintendo to a certain degree, I think that says something. So, how do they make money? How, if that limited pool of money is not enough, how do these games make money? And I think the answer is pretty obvious, though not every game has had to do this. But if you're going on this service and you know what again, whatever your plan is, whatever payday you get from that, I think you have to think about, okay, how do we continue to monetize this game and make more money? And I think the answer is monetization on the back end, whether it be microtransactions, season passes, cosmetics, skins, DLC, stuff like that. I think that's the answer. And if that's the answer, and I've mentioned this before, I feel like that could lead to a shift in how games are made if they're being made for subscription services, i.e., free to play. And this could potentially mean like a race to the bottom, like we see in mobile, to where every game is just a shit show in terms of pay to win and get in, but then you got to pay, and it's just this whole mess of just garbage. I don't want that. I don't want that in my video games. I know a lot of people love live service games. I think there's a place for live service games, but I don't want that across all my games. I still want my narrative driven single player experiences. I love those style of games. I mean, that's what I thrive on. And I'm not saying that we wouldn't get those style of games. I still think we'd get, the occasional narrative driven single player game, but I think the majority of what you're going to see, especially if they're being made specifically for subscription services, is heavily monetized games that are going to mirror, free to play models. And I don't want that. I really don't. And I know that Xbox talks about they want to allow their devs creativity and freedom, be able to make what they want and all that stuff. And I think they can do that, again, because it's subsidized. But if this is the model that has to be adopted elsewhere, I don't think the same can be said. And I think you'll be put into a position where you have to try to find ways to make money. And I don't know that the answer to that is always good. And so, all that aside, I think there's a couple things to think about here when it comes to to Xbox, because this piece of news is in addition to some kind of other bad news at the end of Q4 leading into early this year around Xbox. To recap a few, they've reported that hardware revenue sales are down 13%, content and services revenue down 12%. They did state a new record high monthly active users at 120 million. However, they don't define it. And my theory on that is that this involves, basically anyone who accesses the Xbox store, Xbox game cloud services, their PC launchers, etc. So that, because the Xbox ecosystem is bigger than your Xbox One X, right? Or Series X, I should say. It's available on phones, it's available on PCs, TVs, etc. So I think it's accounting for all those things, which is why it's such a big number, but they don't define it. They also, remember, they had the 10K layoffs, which you talked on, which included Bethesda and 343. There's been a lot of lead devs coming out talking about major leadership issues, some troublesome times in the studios. And then a long thing that's been talked about is clear mismanagement of their studios, because you have to look at their I think they have 23 different studios right now. You have to look at that and be like, what the hell's going on? Where are the games? Now, this year we may get that. I think we're finally going to see some of these games come to fruition, which is really, really exciting. But something's not right. And I don't like the idea that Microsoft feels like they can just buy their way out of it. But hey, at least we got Hi-Fi Rush, right? Am I right? Not a kid. I still do want to play that game. I genuinely do want to play that game, because it seems like a lot of people love it. And I kind of want to see what it's all about. Beautiful art style, by the way, too. Like, that game is gorgeous. And I like Tango Gameworks, I have to say. They really changed my mind with Ghostwire Tokyo. I talked about that early last year. Absolutely fell in love with that game. So maybe I'll love Hi-Fi Rush. So I still want to try that out. That is on my to playlist. So definitely. But I'm sure some folks will listen to this long-winded conversation, or rant, if you will, about Game Pass and think that I am a PlayStation fanboy, for one, which I don't think I've made it a secret that I prefer my PlayStation. I'm a big PlayStation fan. Putting that out there. I love my PlayStation. My PlayStation 5 is my go-to console. That's what I primarily play on. I love it. But I also have an Xbox, and during the 360 era, I was on my Xbox. I was primarily playing on my Xbox. Everything went through there with the exception of like PlayStation exclusives, which I played on my PS3. So there's that. I'm not trying to hide that. But the other people, I'm sure there are some people who say that I want Xbox to fail. And that's not true at all. I really don't. I want them to succeed, but in a competitive manner. And I want them to get back to what they were doing to the 360 era. Think about the good times during the 360 era, right? We had Halo Reach, Halo 3, Halo ODST. Halo was in a really good spot. We had the Gears trilogy. Gears was clicking on all gears, pun intended. We had Fable 2. We had the Project Gotham Racing series, which I think was awesome. And I know they have Forza now, but there was something special about PGR. It really appealed to me, which is like a non-racing guy. They secured third-party games like Alan Wake. Alan Wake was exclusive on Xbox up until the remastered came out, I think last year or the year before. That I believe also like games like Oblivion were timed exclusives, so they were very good at securing exclusives for their platform. They had the multiplayer deal with Call of Duty, so they had that advantage. Not that I really care about Call of Duty much anymore. They also curated high quality indie games. Don't forget that. Games like Limbo, Shadow Complex, Braid. Shadow Complex was dope, by the way. That game is phenomenal. But they were pioneers in that space. And I think one of the biggest things is they focused on the games. That's what I want them to get back to. Focus on the games. And some of that even carried into the Xbox One time frame with, I've talked about Gears 4. I love that game. Sunset Overdrive is fantastic. I still think to this day that it is the best Xbox One game to have come out exclusively on that platform. And then they had deals like Titanfall. Titanfall was the reason I got my Xbox One. So they did a lot of good things. And the last, 5-7 years, actually probably 7-8 years, they've kind of fallen off that path. And obviously we know the launch of the Xbox One was very, very bad and very, very damaging. They're probably still recovering from that to a certain degree, but that's what I want them to get back to. Gets back to some of that, you know? And now I want to end with this because I came across this tweet that someone put out, and I thought it kind of summarized a lot of what we've been talking about and really puts into perspective, Xbox versus PlayStation and the rest of the industry. So, sorry, my nose is running. Okay, here we go. So they said Sony's market cap is $93 billion. Between their indie purchases, Bethesda, and Activision Blizzard, Microsoft will have spent more than Sony's entire market cap on buying up developers, publishers, and IP. Let that fact sink in for a minute. People on this thread can play the poor little Microsoft, the world's tiniest violin, all they want, but that isn't competition. That's a multi-trillion-dollar corporation succeeding by default because they can massively outspend the competition, to the order of dropping Sony's entire market cap without breaking a sweat. There's nothing fair about one player in an industry being so vastly wealthy that they could spend the entire market cap of their main competitor to compete fairly. In fact, they have to do that to compete all the shows. Let me take a step back. I misread that. In fact, if they have to do that to compete at all, that shows that they've failed to compete on anything even remotely resembling a level playing field. Microsoft has had every opportunity in the world to compete. They've been in the console market for over 20 years, only something like 5 years less than Sony actually. They had developers and were making games on PC before Sony ever entered the gaming market. They had a hugely successful 360 to capitalize off of. They had Lionhead, Rare, Bungie. They pioneered online gaming, subscription gaming services. They were the first console maker to embrace DLC and microtransactions, where they now make most of their money. Microsoft hasn't failed to beat Sony because Sony's unfair advantage. They've failed to beat them because of their mismanagement of their studios and their first-party portfolio, their choice to focus on and invest in Connect, and the damage they did to their own brand with the One. End quote. I think that's pretty powerful, and I think that encapsulates a lot. And I think it's mostly spot on, I have to say. And so I think the biggest thing is the market cap comparison. The fact that Xbox and Microsoft are spending Sony's entire market cap to try to be competitive. That's insane. And that shows you how big Microsoft and Xbox actually are. When we talk about the deep pockets of Microsoft, that's what we're talking about. And that's in the fact that that's the entire market cap of another corporation, their competitor. That tells me, and to the point where other companies like PlayStation and Nintendo cannot do what Xbox is doing, that puts it into context there. And so there's that. But I think the other thing that's nice in here, that I think it's important to point out, is all the great things that Xbox has done over the years. Because I don't think we shouldn't dismiss that at all. You talk about the great things they did with their studios, Lionhead, Fable, Retro, Bungie with Halo. All great things. And then the pioneering that they've done in the online space, Xbox Live Arcade, Xbox Live Marketplace. I mean, they shaped online marketplaces in gaming as we know it today. And the whole Xbox Live Gold, the whole subscription thing with online services. They were there. They pioneered that. It's fantastic. And a lot of that stuff is good and has pushed gaming forward in a lot of different ways. But I love what he says here that like we're supposed to just be and say poor little Microsoft because they can't compete and play the world's tiniest little violin for them. I love that because no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't be cheering on a multi-trillion-dollar corporation that feels like they have to spend billions and billions of dollars to compete when back in the 360 era, they did compete. And they competed because they focused on the games. They made good games. They put out good shit. They put out must-play titles, and they brought people to their ecosystem, all while innovating on that platform. Now, all they want to do is buy up everything, push game prices down, and undercut their competition by outspending them. That's why I have a problem with it. That's not fair competition at all. And I think this puts it in a really good context. The last thing I do have a problem with is he says the reason they're failing is mismanagement of their studios. I agree with that. Their choice to focus on and invest on Kinect. I mean, maybe, but I mean, Kinect's dead. And at the time when Kinect came out, I still have my 360 Kinect. That thing is dope. I love it. And it was truly innovationary. It was really, really cool. There were some fun games on it. I don't have a problem with the Kinect. I wouldn't say that led to their downfall. Maybe they invested a little too much into it in the Xbox One era as they transitioned over, but I digress there. And the damage they did to their own brand with the One, for sure. I mean, I think the launch of the Xbox One was catastrophic for them. To Phil's credit, I think he's turned the ship around. He's generated a lot of goodwill with a lot of gamers, but I think a lot of it's because things are consumer friendly, meaning he's giving shit away. And eventually I think that catches up to you. So I thought this little message, I think, really puts things into context and is a great way to end on, because I think it's important. So let me know what you think. Let me just think about all this. That's all I got. I think this is really interesting news. I don't mean for this to be a bash Xbox and Game Pass episode. That's not my intent at all. I strictly want to provide perspective and talk about the effects of Game Pass on the industry, talk about competition in the industry, and caution people to root for a mega multi-trillion-dollar corporation pushing and outbidding everybody. I think that's a problem. And I don't think we should be rooting on for these giant corporations to be doing such things. They don't give a shit about you. They just want your money. So I think that's important to think about. So as always, let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this topic. It was a good episode, I have to say. It's fun, and I think it's fun to dive into this stuff and provide perspective. Exciting stuff coming next week as we'll dive into the PSVR 2. Mine should be coming. I'm very excited about that. So I will share lots of my thoughts. Maybe even show off the device. So if you like to tune in the video episodes, you can do so on YouTube and or Rumble. And I hope you guys have a great week. So I'll talk to you next time. Until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.